I know, it's still kinda early for this one, but we're now a month into the season, so we pretty much have a general idea by now, who's been stellar in net and who's been struggling. In this video, we're going to go up the ranks and talk about the 5 worst goaltenders so far. Keep in mind, we'll be focusing more on the starters, or at least in one case, the expected starter, and we'll take a look at stats and take into consideration the overall performance of their respective teams. And with that, here are the NHL's top 5 worst goaltenders of 2021 thus far.
Now, we've seen signs of this loose defensive play in the last couple of years, but Jacob Markstrom was always there to bail them out. He's not there this year, and their goaltending has simply been average, which is not good enough when you're playing the way they are.
Well, some may question why he's not higher on this list. To me, the overall state of the team that Holtby's playing for hasn't been the greatest. Therefore, we've got to give the guy a little break. Even still, going into the season, I personally had much higher expectations for Holtby and the team. But yeah, let's just say they've been a mess. Even still, when you're giving up the most goals out of the entire league, well, your stats are going to take a little toll. And while yes, the team has been awful, if you take a look at, say, Mikko Koskinen's stats, for example, he's made way more saves, been shouldering most of the workload, and still has both a better save percentage and goals against average. Not saying Koskinen's winning the Vezina or anything, but you probably get my point. But yeah, not all his fault, but for a previous Vezina winner, it's still a little surprising, at least to me. He did struggle though last season as well with Washington, so he could be starting to decline a little. Really feel for the guy though, as he's been visibly flustered at the abysmal defensive core, and therefore I really hope this team can turn it around. So, before everyone starts ripping me for having Murray on here, we all have to remember that this is a guy that has struggled for a while now. He struggled in Pittsburgh, who, was an all-around better team than Ottawa, lost his crease to another netminder, so considering all of the previous context and the contract that he's under, I had to have him on this list. But obviously, I had to give him a break as well, similarly to Holtby, because, his team has also been mediocre at best. So not all of the blame obviously goes onto his shoulders, as his backups numbers aren't the greatest either. But when a guy literally scores 8 seconds into a game on you, well, there has to be a reason. You do have to give him some credit though, as he's made a lot of saves and played a lot of minutes comparatively. But for most of us, myself included, I thought Murray's new setting would help him, not hurt him per se. Hopefully the time away recovering from injury will benefit the netminder while he's getting some R&R. So reasoning for having Saros here, well, for one, I think most of us can agree that Nashville has been a better overall team than all the others previously mentioned. They're not going to be a division leader or cup contender, but in my opinion, they're not really a bottom feeder either. But I think it's been a telling sign that Saros hasn't been at his best because, Pekka Rinne, who is probably in his last year playing, has been having to split the playing time down the middle with the young netminder. And while you could chalk this up to the team not being the greatest, unfortunately for Saros, this has been a trend for quite some time. As his workload increases, well, so does his goals against average. And yeah, his save percentage decreases as well. Another telling sign to me is the amount of saves he has made paired with his save percentage and goals against average, as Saros hasn't made as many saves as Holtby or Murray and has had less playing time. Therefore, putting him at third made logical sense to me. When your own coach pipes up and calls you out for saying about his goaltending, quote, not up to our standard, well, there's probably a reason. And that was after the unfortunate game where Jones let in 3 goals in 6 shots against the LA Kings, currently sporting the worst save percentage in the league out of, all attendees that have played 5 or more games. San Jose's starter has continued to struggle. Granted, his team hasn't been the greatest out there, so you do have to give him a little sympathy, as Dubnyk's been injured, so there hasn't really been a reliable guy available to shoulder some of the workload. But if you pair him up against his peers that have played around the same time, made nearly the same amount of saves, well, Jones unfortunately appears to be average at best. But yeah, here's the rest of what Budner had to say about Jones. I mean, we've given him a chance here to grab the net, especially with Dubnyk being hurt. Again, we're not expecting him to win hockey games for us, to stand on his head, but we've got to have solid goaltending, especially at the beginning of games, Butner says. Yeah, I'm sensing a little frustration there. Regardless, the season's still young, so hopefully for Jones, it'll get better before it gets worse. I mean, maybe? Yeah, not a good place to be if you're a Penguins fan. I mean, Jars was the starter before the season began anyways. But I think most of us have realized that unfortunately, this hasn't been the same Tristan Jarry that basically came in and forced Murray out of Pitt's crease. As a goaltender, currently has the 4th worst save percentage out of the entire league and has appeared to be fragile at best. Granted, the Penguins have had their own share of ups and downs thus far, but still, Pittsburgh's not an Ottawa or Vancouver type caliber team. As is the norm in the Berg, the goalie controversy has lived on, as Casey DeSmith has been starting many more games than expected. While DeSmith continues to shine for the Penguins, Jarry has remained on the bench sidelined in hopes that he can once prove himself again in net.